There's been a lot of news this week about vet fees. What is actually going on?
So the government have announced new legislation about how vets are regulated. It's been so many years, it was 1966, can you believe, since there was new regulation. And there's a lot of really great stuff in the proposed white paper. Much better recognition for veterinary nurses, which I've always been a really strong advocate of. Better regulation of vet businesses rather than individual vets. But the media and some MPs have been very focused on the money side. And actually, I'm not convinced. This is really great news. But if you're waiting for an impact on your vet bills, I think that would be a mistake. The good news is that there are a lot of practical things that you can do now. And I'm going to cover those in my following videos.
So does that mean the bills are going to get cheaper?
So there really isn't very much in the white paper about the actual bills. There will be a change to prescriptions. So you can currently ask for a written prescription for medications to get that from an online pharmacy, which because of the bulk buying, it is generally cheaper. So that is definitely something that you can currently ask for. Those prices are going to be capped. But being honest, they are a very small proportion for many people of the vet bills that they're facing, particularly when you have an unwell pet and an acute situation where you're needing to make decisions about tests and about treatment.
If you're worried about the cost of treatment, what's the single most useful thing to do?
The most important thing is to talk about it, to talk openly about money. Now, I know that most vets are not comfortable doing that. We're not really trained to talk about money, but we need to. We need to talk about money, but that means that we need our clients to be open and honest about budgets, to appreciate that there is no NHS for pets. Vet businesses, they are private. This is an industry where things have to be charged for. The vets have a lot of overheads. Everything needs to be paid for. We've just got to be much more open and honest about this. That, I think, is the real starting place. Openness and a willingness to discuss.
And is it not a bit embarrassing to bring up money with the vet?
Yeah, and this is partly why vets don't like to talk about it. No one wants to appear as though their primary concern is money. Of course, the primary concern is your pet, your unwell pet, the vet wanting to do the best for your pet. But the reality is, as I've said, this isn't an industry, these are businesses. Money is a big factor. And if we ignore that, then we're going to get into all sorts of muddles down the line. It is embarrassing, but no vet is going to think, or no good vet is going to think badly of you to bring up money. They'll probably actually be relieved when it is done in the right way.
You mentioned there used to be a saying among vets. What is it?
Yeah, so this is a bit of an old school vet saying. I remember probably my first or second boss saying, don't x-ray the client's wallet. And what that really meant was not to make judgments about clients based on maybe how they appear or the car they drive or their sort of, just don't make judgments. Don't pick and choose things for clients, assuming pet owners, assuming what you think they can afford. So the vet is very much trained to give all of the options, and that can feel quite overwhelming for clients. But the important thing in a good vet client relationship is the ability to talk openly and honestly about that. These are the options, this is what I can afford, this is what I can't afford, this is what this means. Neither side should be making judgments. It's about having that open, honest conversation.
And what do people get wrong about pet insurance?
So pet insurance can be fantastic, it can be really helpful, but increasingly it has got more complicated. So it's really important to understand what you're actually getting with your policy. Right at the very beginning, do your research, get the best level of cover that you can afford, but you need to understand particularly the level of cover that you've got, whether you've got lifetime cover or 1 year for a particular condition, what your excess is, and any exclusion. So any condition that your pet has prior to taking out the insurance, that will become an exclusion, and those exclusions can be quite broad.
And what if you're not sure your policy actually covers something specifically?
So the documents themselves can be quite dense and quite difficult. So getting in touch with your insurance company, don't hope and just muddle on through. Actually contact your insurance company. Many of them will do something called a pre-authorization, where if you know something's coming down the line, they will actually, you can put the claim in advance, and they will actually let you know whether it's covered or not. It is far better to do that than to hope and then make a claim and that claim is rejected, because the vet has absolutely every right to chase that money if you haven't paid, or obviously if you have paid, you could really find yourself in trouble. So it just isn't worth it. It is a case of really reading the small print.
You talk about owners needing to know their number. What does that actually mean?
So again, owners can feel really bad for putting a budget on their pet's healthcare. But it is important. I think it's been quite normalised. We see it on the TV that, you know, really big procedures, expensive procedures are performed. Either the cost isn't mentioned or they're tens of thousands of pounds, and it's quite normalised. But the reality is most people can't afford those things. They're not normal in the way that they're sometimes presented. So people shouldn't be embarrassed to have thought about what their budget is. That might be their insurance limit. It might be their insurance limit plus. It might be, maybe if they're not insured, they're self-insured, it might be a small savings account that they've got. Or the reality might be that there actually is really not very much money. And knowing that and sharing that is really valuable. You know, vets should not be judging you on being clear about what your budget is. And I think, you know, there are so many, you know, areas in life where we have to budget and we have to have budgets. And, you know, there isn't, I hate the saying, but it's kind of relevant, there isn't a magic money tree that people can reach for when their pet becomes unwell. And that's just a reality.
Does it not feel a bit cold to put a figure on your pet's care?
I mean, it is just reality, you know. Sadly, you know, there aren't just sort of pots of money available, unfortunately. You know, of course, everyone always wants the best for their pet, but I guess the important thing here is by being upfront about your number, how much money you've got, the diagnostics, the treatment, they can be more focused on the particular need and the particular budget that you've got. That might mean needing to make some compromises. It might mean needing to accept a little bit more unknown, but it can lead to, you know, just as good a pathway ultimately.
Okay, a couple of questions here. Is there such thing as too much testing? And how do you know if the test is actually worth doing?
So yeah, so this follows on really from this idea of, you know, having to choose where you spend your money if you don't have a kind of limitless pot, which none of us do. Obviously, it's feels nice to have run all the tests, to have all the answers, but that isn't necessarily what is needed for your pet. And actually, having lots of tests and lots of treatment and being in and out of the hospital can also be quite unpleasant for your pet. So it's really important that we target testing and treatment to the things that are really going to make a difference. And I think for me, and I have written a separate article on this, I'll link to in the comments, on diagnostics, the really important thing is asking the question, how is this test going to change the outcome for my pet? Because it might give you an answer, which is, you know, might make you feel better, but if it doesn't change the outcome for your pet, then that is not a test that I would be, you know, I wouldn't be spending my money on.
And is it a good idea or a bad idea to take out loans or finance for treatment?
I mean, that is not a question that I can really answer, because that is a very individual decision. And, you know, there's a lot of legislation around kind of the loans, and, you know, some vets can have been trained to be able to offer certain products. So those options are out there. I think the most important thing for any testing or treatment, but especially if you're getting yourself into debt to do it, is to be really, really clear what the outcome is. You know, it is to be really clear on, is this going to be, you know, is there a very good chance of this being curative, or could I be spending this money? And in all likelihood, am I just going to be prolonging things? There's no guarantees in healthcare, but your vet should be able to give you some good guidance on that, because to end up with a really big debt and a suffering or a pet that's not alive, that is a very challenging situation to be in. As I say, there's no guarantees, but you should be able to get an idea of what you should expect at the end of it.
What's the hardest question owners have to ask themselves?
This is a conversation to have with your vet. It is about, am I spending this money for my pet to have a good life or just a longer life? And if that longer life is not a good quality life, then we do really need to ask ourselves if that is appropriate for that pet, regardless of the money, actually. So really focusing on a good quality of life for your pet. Is what you're doing at the tests of the treatment, are they going to give a good outcome in terms of quality of life, not just keeping a pet alive? Because of course we want our pet with us, we have that bond, we've experienced that. It's terrible when you lose them, but the focus really needs to be on them having a good quality of life.
And as a pet owner, we've been through and they're still not sure they're making the right call.
And that's actually why I set up Pet Lighthouse. Even as a vet, having been through the loss of our dog, Tilly, it was very difficult. We didn't have a definitive diagnosis. I really lent on my vet friends, sought a lot of advice. And I know I can look back now and know that we did the right thing, we made the right decision. Really seeing that value of an independent, slightly separate vet friend. And that's really the service that Pet Lighthouse is here to provide, to give the time and space to answer all the questions, to talk through the findings, and to find a pathway through what's described as the decision fog.